are having a wonderful afternoon. We are here for such a great occasion. As Thor said, I am Bacardi Jackson, and I am a proud member of the board of the Community Foundation of Broward. And this is a very special day that honors and celebrates the members of our Legacy Society, those special philanthropists who have committed to using their estate plans to build and add to the endowed funds at the Community Foundation. So we are here today to thank you for choosing to create a gift from your estate to sustain the community that has nurtured and sustained you. Each of you has made a choice to partner with the Community Foundation of Broward, and you have thoughtfully examined our 31-year track record of protecting and nurturing legacies of hundreds of residents, and you have found the confidence and peace of mind you desire with the Community Foundation. You know that we will do the research and the legwork to maximize the impact of every single grant that we make. You understand that the Community Foundation has the deep community knowledge that connects us to nonprofit businesses, businesses and community leaders, so that we can get things done, so that we can be the spark that ignites the flame of action in this community. And you appreciate that we have the expertise to craft personalized charitable funds that achieve your specific philanthropic and financial goals. As part of our partnership with you, the foundation informs you of important issues, connects you to others who have the same shared values, and when the time comes, you know that the Community Foundation will faithfully ensure that your gift delivers the game-changing philanthropic impact you envisioned in your name. Each of you here today, every one of you, is important to us, but this day belongs to our Legacy Society members for the gift that they will make to the future of Broward County. And what a bright future it is. Thanks to you and your promised collective gift of $200 million. So, it is with great admiration and appreciation that we will now recognize each member of our Legacy Society here with us today, the very special people around you who are pinned with roses. And my fellow board members, General James Monroe and James Donnelly, are going to help us do that. Over to you.
Good morning. If I could ask those that we call your names, if you would stand if you can and remain standing until the very end. We would certainly like to recognize you as special members of this legacy. Bill Ash, Muriel Biscup, Muriel here, there. Carolyn Davis and Ned Black, Richard Bray, Nancy Brown, Melanie Plantcamp, Linda and Michael Carter, Bonnie and James Collins, Mitchell Grant, Barbara Gray, Barbara Gravier. I hope I didn't mess that one. Was that close? It's in the ballpark, eh? Okay, thank you. Ed Hasek, Roberta and Frank Pilson, Leslie Jones, Jenny and Dick Kearns. The light up here is terrible. Hope you can see better than I can. Walter Kruger, David Kiner, Marcy Lambert, and Art Lambertus. Okay, Jim?
Thank you, General. With a voice like that, I'm not surprised it's General. I would like to add to those incredible list of names, Gabrielle Magdans, Patricia Martinez, Joanne and Dawn Medali, Greg Medali, Jan Moran, Daryl Miller, Ginny Miller, Jacqueline Niehaus, Nanette Olson, Pat Owen, Ann Powell, Alvin Ross, Chuck Ross, Alice Rutan, Franklin Schmidt, Patricia Shub, Fred Smith, Eugenia Smith, Sandy Title, Elaine Vasquez, May Jean Wolf, and Kurt Zimmerman. In addition to this illustrious group, we have several Legacy Society members who wish to remain anonymous, and we certainly honor that and thank them as well. So on behalf of the Community Foundation, we want to say thank you to our Legacy Society members who come together to make, with the foundation, to make Broward County an incredible place to live and play. So thank you very much. Let's have a round of applause for all of our Legacy members.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. I want to thank Arlene Pecora and the wonderful folks at Signature Grand for their wonderful hospitality and this beautiful dessert. Thank you so much. So last Friday, if you were watching TV, there was a live interview with astronaut Scott Kelly. He's the astronaut, the American astronaut, that is spending a year living in the International Space Station. It was day 321 for him, if you're counting. And they asked him, from your perspective, how does Earth look to you? And you have to admit, that's an amazing perspective that he has. And he said, well, I don't think the Earth is unhealthy, but it looks very, very fragile to me. Well, on the ground, we didn't need a rocket scientist to tell us that. We have been in conversation with a number of folks throughout the community, many of you, and talking in this past year on what are the issues that matter to you. And time again, you shared with us that what's on your mind is protecting our environment. I mean, you really can't open up the newspaper without seeing it. To the north, it's not uncommon to see 10 billion gallons of water, of polluted water, going into Lake Okeechobee. And the next day you'll read about how the fresh water is being released into the ocean. It doesn't make sense. To the east, of 24 miles of Broward beaches, 21 miles of that is considered to be in a degrading position. To the south, we read about saltwater intrusion into our Biscayne aquifer, which really affects the fresh water that we use as our drinking water. And to the west, if I've got my geography correct, to the west, only 2% of the Everglades is fully intact. Well, we find this of concern. The community finds that of concern. And we believe that protecting the environment is important for our health, our quality of life, our economy, and our future generations. So what are we going to do about it? Well, the Community Foundation of Broward has made a commitment to invest $1 million over the next 5 years in projects protecting our environment that we call Eco Broward. Now, I know that's not a lot of money, especially in that kind of work. So we're going to have to leverage our resources. We're going to have to work collaboratively. We're going to have to attract other people to this mission to make progress in this work. And maybe along the way, a future Legacy Society member will see what we're doing and say, hey, I want my legacy to be about environmental protection. So think about this work as really just the beginning for this journey. How are we going to do this work? Well, we'll bring the community together and we will look at effective environmental strategies. Sounds pretty complicated. It gets worse. I could go on to say conservation, remediation, education, but really it's simple as this. If it's broken, we'll try to fix it. If it's beautiful, we'll preserve it forever. And if it's possible, we'll make it happen. Because we believe that's what's important. That's what we need to do. And the images you're going to see today that you've already been watching on the big screens, they're beautiful and stunning, and we have the privilege of living here and enjoying that, so we have the responsibility to protect it for the next generation. Which takes me full circle to you, our Legacy Society members. You already live that concept of responsibility for the future, and we thank you. I want you to know at the foundation, we will honor your vision for a better tomorrow on the issues that matter to you. We will continue your family name forever, and we will ensure that your philanthropy has game-changing impact in our community, because you're truly making a difference for good and forever. So thank you to you. Now, we couldn't have this kind of vision and lead boldly without that kind of leadership from the very, 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 very top, which means our board of directors. I would like both our current and our past board members to stand so that we can thank you for your dedication and vision. Come on, you gotta stand. There you go. Thank you. So with that, I would like Joan Crane to join me on stage. She's our immediate past chair. She is also Senior Director and Global Family Wealth Strategist. I got it. For BNY Mellon Wealth Management. We are delighted to have you join us.
Thank you. Anyway, good afternoon. It's a real joy to be here, both as the past board member, sniff, sniff, and also as a representative of BNY Mellon Wealth Management. BNY Mellon is really honored to be able to sponsor this event for the 5th consecutive year. We've had a long-standing relationship with the Community Foundation. I think that reflects our joint shared values, corporate values, of developing deep relationships with the people we serve. Also, our passion for having real high personalized service. And now that we speak of passion, I'm going to go into what our speaker is most passionate about. And Mac Stone grew up in the springs and swamps of north central Florida, where he developed a real love for photography and for nature. Mac is a modern day adventurer. He's traveled to many of the world's most exotic places, places we can usually just dream about. And through his camera lens, he's witnessed political upheavals, scientific wonders, environmental calamities, and the most unimaginable beauty, which I think we're seeing a bit of today. Mac uses his photography to bring these experiences to us and to spark conversations about nature, which I know he's had many of already here with you today. we're really actually privileged to see Mac today because he's fresh off spending 5 years in the Everglades watershed, finalizing his book, which is highly acclaimed and award-winning. It's called Everglades, America's Wetland. As someone who's personally spent many hours kayaking happily in some of these wonderful preserves in the Everglades, I'm really interested to hear Mac's presentation and see more of his photos. So with that, let's honor Mac and have him start his talk.
Right. No? How about if I just show photos? I don't have to talk? No? All right. Thank you guys so much for having me. Very, very honored to be here. You guys are a really inspiring group, and I hope we can share some photos and stories that will also inspire you for the things that we have here. Very local, very close by. I did spend 5 years down in the Everglades, and I'd love to tell you about what this has been like. I know I look pretty young. People have been saying, oh, he's 12. He's got to be 12. I'm actually 14. Not really. So I'm a conservation photographer. And as a conservation photographer, what that is a little niche. We tell stories, and we tell stories about the environment, typically. And I've had the great privilege of calling this my job because I get to travel to some incredible places, remote areas, cultures all around the world. It's fantastic. I used to, flip through National Geographic when I was a kid saying, God, I hope this is my job one day. And sometimes I have to pinch myself because it is. And people often get this really inflated idea about what it is they think I do. They think it looks like this all the time. Like sunrises, sunsets, and rainbows, and, flying in planes with the doors kicked off. Sometimes, yeah, sure. It does happen. Most of the time, it looks like this. This is a little more accurate. And despite the look on my face, this is actually my happy place. This is my comfort zone because I'm a swamp. I'm a wetland guy. This is what I like to do. And we can't always afford the fanciest places to stay at night, so we tend to sleep a lot outdoors, oftentimes alone. I prefer a hammock because I can stay dry, keep it mosquito-proof. That's fine. That's fine. And I hope all of you are done with your food, because we also can't afford the fanciest places to eat. And so, when we're off in the field and we're traveling all over the place, we have to eat whatever's on the local menu. And it's not like the Grand here. If you're in the Ecuadorian Paramo, you're going to eat what's called a cuy, which is a guinea pig. Yeah, not as good as it looks. Not quite. But what makes our experiences, I think, different from that of the average traveler is that even when we're in these moments of despair and these times of darkness, like being broken down on the side of the Dead Dog Road in the Everglades in the summer, we think, there might be a photo to be. There might be a story to be told. And why is storytelling important? Storytelling is important because it helps us to connect that cultural and that natural heritage that we have. Here in the Southeast, you might have heard it. I grew up with it. There's an alarming disconnect, I think, the general public and these natural areas that allow us to be here in the first place. And we're visual creatures. I've seen people responding to some of the photos. We are visual creatures, and we use what we see to teach us what we know. And now, if we use what we see to teach us what we know, and the majority of the public is not going to go willingly wade out into a swamp or a wetland and see it for themselves, then how can we then expect those same people to then advocate on behalf of their protection? We can't. We don't. So my job then is to use the camera as a communication tool to help bridge that gap between the science and the aesthetic, to help get people on board, to get them thinking, to get them talking, hopefully, ultimately, get them caring. And I grew up doing this, believe it or not, 16 years ago when I was in high school. I'm 31 now. And I fell in love with discovery and the environment that what we had around because I was lucky enough to grow up in a place, Gainesville, Florida, where people had the foresight to set these areas aside, make them these natural havens, because these became my training ground, my foundation. These became my inspiration. And I fell in love with discovery, going out and recognizing our brand of wilderness, the old Florida, the Florida that I found. And despite all these years that have passed, my childlike wonder, fascination with nature has actually never matured. I still see the world through the eyes of a child, and so I try to incorporate that sense of wonderment and curiosity into my photography whenever I can. Aren't these guys fun? Burrowing owls, they look like little angry birds. Great. They're great. They're great. And we're really lucky here, because here in Florida, we have pretty much a blank slate, a blank canvas that we can fill with the most fanciful adventures, incredible experiences. It's just a matter of how far our imagination is going to take us. So a lot of people will look at this and they'll say, oh, wow, yeah, that's a cool tree. And it is a cool tree. But when I look at this, I see opportunity. And I actually see an entire weekend spent sleeping, camping in it, and making photos because it's fun. Because when I was growing up looking in those pages of National Geographic magazine, these are the types of photos that inspired me to get off the sofa, to go check out the woods and put my head underwater. And I've been photographing all over the world. Some places I still really want to go, but I always keep coming back here because I can honestly tell you that what we have here in the Sunshine State rivals anything else that I have seen, period. But yet our tourism industry is busy promoting all the wrong things. Because before most kids are 12, or heck, before they're even 18, before they go off and leave home, they'll have been to Disney World more times than they've been camping under a starry sky or paddling. And this is unfortunate because this next generation really is missing out on all those fundamental connections that create a real and true sense of ownership for the place that they call home. And this is compounded by the fact that these natural areas that define our natural heritage and fuel our aquifer have been deemed as scary and spooky, right? Dangerous. You don't want to go in there. And actually, when our ancestors first arrived, they were told, oh, stay out of these swamps because they're haunted. They're full of ghosts and evil spirits. Still don't know where they came up with that idea. But it's actually led to a very real, pervasive disconnect that has kept the public silent, disinterested, and ultimately our environment, our unique environment, at risk. Because we are a state that is surrounded and defined by water. And yet for centuries, these swamps and wetlands have been regarded as wastelands, as places only fit for drainage. In fact, not too long ago, it was known that only a good swamp is a drained swamp. In fact, draining a swamp to make way for agriculture and development was considered the very essence of conservation. And you can understand because I guess, swamps are known to harbor alligators and snakes. And any young photographers out there, I used to use photos like this to leverage long telephoto lenses out of my parents. They would try to confiscate my camera. And I said, well, I need a longer lens. Photos like this. Powerful tool, photography. Convincing. Because the more we learn about these sodden landscapes, the more science we're investing in figuring out the rhythms of these places, the more we're learning about interspecies relationships, the interconnectedness of these habitats, different flyways. They're fascinating. Take this bird, for example. This is a prothonotary warbler. Y'all ever seen this bird? Fascinating. These are great birds because they're tiny, and they're swamp birds through and through. Swamp birds without fangs and a forked tongue. It's this beautiful little swamp bird. And they nest and they breed and they mate in these old-growth swamps. They're one of only 2 cavity nesting warblers in the United States. So they put their little eggs there in these cypress trees or in hollow trees, and they rely on these old-growth swamps to be able to feed their young. The old growth has decaying matter, has a new growth, has the healthy water that can actually supply the macroinvertebrates, what they eat. So because we've saved a couple of these old growth swamps, biologists are now beginning to pay attention to what's happening, the rhythms that are going on. So what they'll do is they'll put out these little decoys, they'll catch these prothonotary warblers and mist nets, and then they equip them with these backpacks, little GPS locators, the most adorable backpacks you've ever seen. And they put these things on them, and then they release them, and they let them go. And they collect data on these birds. And the data that's coming back on the prothonotary warbler is incredible. Because what they're learning is that these birds, after mating in the spring, raising their young, only after a few months, are then going to fly 5,000 miles over the Gulf of Mexico. This big, right? A bird this big. And then the spring rolls around again after the winter, and then they fly back 5,000 miles. And the GPS data that they're getting is showing something really incredible. Because when these birds fly back, where do they go? Do they go just to some other random swamp somewhere else? No. They go right back to the same exact tree. Can you imagine that? I mean, I get lost in my hometown sometimes, much less fly 5,000, 10,000 miles to come back to the same tree. The site fidelity is really impressive. So what happens then? What happens when this bird makes that journey over for the winter time, and then it winters down in Central and South America, and then it flies 5,000 miles, it comes back to this, a freshly sodded golf course. Sure, it happened. This is the narrative that's been unfolding in Florida and the Southeast for the longest time. So what we're learning is that the more we preserve these little sanctuaries, the more we're going to figure out things about them that might benefit us come down later the line. And so despite all this wilderness and despite all this incredible life that abounds, swamps still have a bad name. Many people feel uncomfortable with the idea of wading into Florida's black water. I get it. But this is what I love about growing up here in the Sunshine State. For many of us, our minds are wired a little bit different. Is that we live with this latent, but maybe a very palpable fear that when we put our toes in the water, there might be something much more ancient, much more adapted than we are. But it's a welcome discomfort, I think, not being top dog, or not always feeling like you're on top. It's okay now in this modern, urban, this digital age to feel humble, to feel vulnerable. So I fell in love with these places that made me feel that. These swamps, these wetlands, this old Florida. And I began seeking them out. And I viewed all these discomforts, all the mosquitoes, snakes, reptiles, as actually affirmation that I'd found true wilderness. And I embraced it wholly, completely. So as a swamp photographer obsessed with black water, I decided to head down to the most famous swamp of all, y'all's backyard, the Everglades. Because growing up in Gainesville, you'd hear the place, Fakahatchee, Loxahatchee, Corkscrew, Big Cypress. And as a kid, that just sounded like one big jungle gym, one big playground that I had to get to. And it's these places that haunted my dreams pretty much. I had to get down there. So I did head down. I started what then turned into this 5-year project to document, to explain, to hopefully reintroduce the Everglades in a new light, in a more inspiring. Because if any of you talk with your out-of-state friends, you hear it all the time. You say Everglades and they say, oh yeah, mosquitoes, gators, now python. That's what they hear. That's what they think all the time. And then you say, no, it's more than that, more than that. They say, oh, okay, yeah, Everglades, yeah, that's the national park. But it's way more than that too, because the national park is just that southern end. Because the Everglades is an entire watershed, spanning over 100 miles long with the Kissimmee Chain of Lakes in the north and flowing down through Lake Okeechobee and the Sawgrass River of Grass down into the mangrove swamp until finally Florida Bay. It is a huge estuary at the end of it, that last receiver of fresh water, 850 square mile estuary. And so we came, right? We came here to the Everglades and we thought, wow, this is a fantastic place. Look at all the potential here. The fisheries are good. The wildlife is productive. We can do this. And so I love to bring you guys in with these beautiful pictures. I love to bring you in because it gets your attention. So I can show you what our real idea looked like for the Everglades. We thought that we could improve upon it. thought that we could change it. Remember that idea of conservation not too long ago was to make way for development in agriculture. That's precisely what we did. We have taken this and we have turned it into this. And we're doing it at an alarming rate. We saw those peaty soils just south of Lake Okeechobee, the ones that used to host these magnificent pond apple orchards with incredible orchids, epiphytes on them. And we wanted them to grow vegetables. We wanted them to grow sugar. And not just enough to sustain our little population here down in South Florida. No, we needed enough for 300 million Americans. Yes. That's okay. We all need to eat too. We do. But we did. We took the river of grass, that slow flowing watershed that fueled that great estuary which now gives us the multi-billion-dollar fishery that we so enjoy. We took that, we turned it into the river of sugarcane. The old 500,000 acres of sugarcane that are now dumping these exceedingly high levels of nutrients into the system. So we talk about the different issues, and it sounds like there are a lot of compounding here in South Florida, here in the Everglades watershed. But I think in order for people to get connected with it, to really understand how these systems work, me as a wildlife and as a conservation photographer, what I like to do is I like to break them down into little digestible narratives. Because the best way to understand what the needs of a habitat are to look at the wildlife that's actually using that habitat to sustain it on a daily basis. So in the northern Everglades, what's going to be that icon? The icon that depends on Lake Okeechobee that represents it so well. The Everglades snail kite. You guys know this bird? It's a beautiful bird, fascinating bird. It's one of the most specialized raptors in the world, and specialized because of its unique biology. So if you look at it, it has these broad wings, really broad wings, and that's so it can sail over the wetlands without expending much energy. And then it has these really long, curved talons, so it can fly over the wetlands, and as it sees an apple snail, it can grab that snail without getting wet. And then it has a really hooked bill, so it can pry open the operculum, get right at that apple. It is specialized because it eats pretty much one source of food. That is unbelievable. So what happens then in this productive system? You had thousands of these birds, the Everglades snail kite, you had thousands of them, and this snail is depending on this healthy wetland. Well, in Lake Okeechobee, they used to expand and contract. As soon as you take away that power to expand and contract, you dike it up, fill it in, you lose those wetlands. And as soon as you lose those wetlands, you lose the snail. And when you lose the snail, and the most specialized raptor in the world that depends on that snail, 400 of our iconic Everglades. So I wanted a photo that would get people stoked about this bird because not that many people know about it. It is a fascinating bird, and it was a fun project to make a photo that I thought would bring this point home. Here's a video about how we did it.
Photographing the Everglades snail kite was definitely one of the most challenging and stressful projects I've ever taken on. The majority of their population exists in and around Lake Okeechobee, which is the 7th largest freshwater lake in the United States. It's a huge area. And unlike other raptors, the snail kite feeds on one source of food, just one, the apple snail. But the apple snail lives underwater most of the time, really only coming up just to breathe, mate, or lay eggs. So kites are constantly soaring over the vegetation, scanning and searching for this prey, which is about the size of a ping pong ball. So this bird is basically able to find a needle in a haystack. I had to find some unique way to photograph that. So I went to Lake Okeechobee. I knew it was going to take a lot of preparation, but because of the size of the area, I also knew it was going to take some sort of bottleneck. So I teamed up with state wildlife biologists, and we built this submersible platform out of PVC, which would contain the snails just right at the top of the water column, along with a camera that I could trigger remotely. So day after day, I'm hauling all my gear out into the water. I'm just sitting in my canoe for 9-hour shifts, just waiting. And it was miserable. And I began to get really discouraged when things were unsuccessful. You're left with your own thoughts, and doubt really starts to creep in. Am I keeping the birds away? Is the camera keeping the birds away? And there's no way of knowing. And so you're constantly at battle with that part of you that just wants to say, and I should just go shoot this with a telephoto lens and just be done with it. 4 days passed and I had nothing to show. And I actually started to think that the image was impossible. But I decided to give it one more effort, and so I returned to Lake Okeechobee. And after setting up the platform and a new flight line, I look off and I see a kite coming over the cattails, and I see him scanning and searching. And he gets right over the trap, and he looks down, and I see that he sees it. And he beelines, he goes straight for the trap.
Yes.
And in that moment, all those months of planning, waiting, all the sunburns, mosquito bites, suddenly,
Oh my
you know,
God.
they're all worth it.
I can't believe it. Oh my God, I love it. This is crazy.
That was fun. It was such a fun project, and I learned a lot. I learned so much about these birds, the way that they time their flights in with the wind. Just by spending time with them, you learn different things about their biology that you never would have learned otherwise. Fascinating stuff. Just so people can view these birds and what they do in a new way. And this is just one bird of this entire system that makes this place so unique. To finally get this one photo that would then eventually become the cover of the book. We're introducing snail kites to people in new and exciting ways. People are then picking up and doing what they can to help. We love that. It's great. It's fun. But you can't tell a story in the Everglades without talking about alligators. I love alligators. Growing up in Gainesville, you can't help it. You're kind of bred that way, I think. Right, Linda? Gators are fun, and I had a good time photographing them at an early age. My parents always thought I had an unhealthy relationship with gators. That's okay. Gators are often misunderstood. They are like our freshwater equivalent to sharks. They are feared and they are hated, but people don't really understand how important they are to the system. And in the Everglades, they're wired a little bit differently than that of the northern states, because the Everglades is defined by this annual drawdown cycle of water. The rainy season in the summer, dry season in the winter. So being an aquatic species, alligators need to stay wet. Well, in the winter, as that water drops down, they're kind of stuck out in pretty bad times if they don't have a place to stay wet in, especially because the bottom substrate is limestone. So what they do is they actually dig. They alter the landscape to fit their needs. They dig out these areas called gator holes, and they do this throughout the year so that when the water finally does drop down, they're going to be able to stay wet and forage. And this affects other species as well. So they become a keystone species in this regard. So how do you make an alligator, this apex predator, at once looks like it dominates the system, but at the same time look vulnerable to that seasonality, vulnerable to the system's requirements? Or you wade out into a pit of about 120 of them, and you hope that you've made a good life choice. I'm still here, so I guess so. But I know you're not going to rally the troops to save the Everglades for the alligator. You're not, because they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere now. They're one of the great conservation success stories. Heck, they're even national champions a couple times over, aren't they? We love gators. But there is one species that you can't help but love too. That's the roseate spoonbill. Love these birds. These birds are great. And you think they're so beautiful, and then you get close to them, and you're like, wait, something's going on with the face there. They're so close to being really pretty. And these birds are fascinating because in Florida Bay, there used to be thousands of them, right? That southern estuary, that last receiver of fresh water in the system, there were thousands, enough to blot out the sun, early explorers used to say. But then at the turn of the 20th century, we brought them down to 2. 2 nesting pairs in Florida Bay. And it's all because people thought they looked better on their hats than they did flying in the sky. And their pelts were actually worth more than gold at the time. And so poachers came out and they had a field day hunting these birds. They're easy to spot, easy to kill, and they made a fortune doing it. So we brought them down to 2. Well, instead of just hanging our hats up and saying, well, I guess there goes that, we stepped in and we said, no, that's not going to work here. We banned the plume trade, and all of a sudden their numbers started rebounding. We made a policy that directly affected the Everglades, and it worked. The birds returned, and as they started returning, biologists started paying attention to these birds because they're really interesting birds, and heck, they're pink. Why not? Let's study them. And what they started finding out is that these birds are directly tied to the health of the system because they're tactile feeders. And a tactile feeder, just like wood storks, if you've ever seen them, they kind of do this combing back and forth. Well, it's because they have to touch their prey in order to eat it. Not like a heron or an egret that can just sit there and spear things. It has to touch it. And that's unique here because these birds, as the scientists started paying attention to them, as their numbers were rebounding, they saw that these birds are always nesting in the wintertime. Well, in the Everglades, the wintertime is the dry season. And why would a bird want to nest in the dry season? Well, as that water drops down, those fish are then culled into these concentrated ponds. So all of a sudden, you have a bird that is dependent on these little fish species. The fish are dependent on the submerged aquatic vegetation, and their success, their nesting success, is directly tied to the seasonality of water. The right amount of water at the right time so they can feed their young. Here you have an indicator species for the overall health of the system, right here, right in our hands, right in our backyard. We've got it. And as these numbers started rebounding, we're celebrating because we're doing it right. The Everglades is looking good. But then just in the mid part of the 20th century, we started messing up. And we started carving up that southern part of the Everglades. And we stopped 2/3 of that water from reaching Florida Bay. We just stopped it. And an estuary depends on fresh water. And if you stop 2/3 of an estuary source from reaching the saline ecosystem, it becomes hypersaline. And the system changes. And all those birds and all those animals that now depend on that system being a healthy estuarine system have to adapt too. And sometimes they can't adapt. And unfortunately, the real story of the spoonbill today looks more something like this. We're down to less than 70 nesting pairs in Florida Bay today, after getting up to around 1,400. Dang, we messed up. We messed up. So you hear it a lot. You hear it all the time. The Everglades is fragile. The Everglades is fragile. But if there's one thing that the Everglades has taught us over all these years, is that it is resilient. Resilient. Because no matter how much we have ditched and dammed and dredged and diked it, there are pieces of it that are still here just waiting for us to put them back together. And what I think is so fascinating about this part of South Florida and the Everglades is that you have this really dynamic place. You have this place where you have this unstoppable force of mankind meeting this immovable object of tropical nature. And it's at this frontier that we have got to ask ourselves, we have got to get a new appraisal. What is the value of biodiversity? What is our drinking water worth? What are these natural systems that actually define this place? What are they worth? And finally, after decades of debate, we are starting to answer some of these questions. And you heard it in the newspaper yesterday, we are slowly undertaking these projects to bring more fresh water south, back to Florida Bay. But it's up to us, it's up to communities like you all to inspire people, to get them off their feet and to get it done. And people ask me all the time, Mac, what can I do? And I say, I've got an easy solution for you. Just go. Get out. Get out there. Enjoy it. Have fun. Take your friends out. Take your family out. Help reestablish and reconnect the public with this place that is Old Florida, that is our home, that is unique, that's different. Hire a fishing guide. Show the state, show our government that protecting wilderness not only makes ecological sense, but economic sense as well. It's a fun thing to do. Just put your feet in the water. Let the swamp change you. It will, I promise. You know, we've been so generous with these other landscapes around the country. We've been cloaking them with this American pride ever since we got here. Places that we now consider define who we are as a nation. Yellowstone, Yosemite, Grand Canyon. And we use these parks and these natural areas as these beacons, as cultural compasses. And I think, sadly, the Everglades is commonly left out of that conversation. But I think it's every bit as iconic and emblematic of who we are as a country as any of these other great landscapes. It's just a different kind of wild. It is our brand of wild. It is a unique and important brand of wild that we have to protect. And I'm encouraged because maybe we're finally starting to come around a little bit. Because what was once deemed this swampy wasteland only fit for draining today is a World Heritage Site. It's a wetland of international importance. And as the world's largest and most ambitious wetland restoration project, the international spotlight is on us in the Sunshine State. Don't you forget it. They are watching everything we do. Because if we can heal this system, it is going to become an icon for wetland restoration all over the world. But it's up to us here. We have to decide which legacy do we want to attach our flag to. You know, they say that the Everglades is our greatest test. If we pass it, we get to keep the planet. I love that quote because it is a challenge. It's a prod. Can we do it? Will we do it? We have to. We must. Because the Everglades is not just a test. It's also a gift. And ultimately, it's our responsibility. And I look out and I see this community of people getting together, and I see what the Community Foundation of Broward is doing to get you all together to make a lasting impact. And I can tell you that it really, really matters. From someone that benefits from the fruits of the outdoors and who gets fulfillment from the outdoors, it matters. And it matters now, and it'll matter 10 years, and it'll matter 20 years, and 100 years down the line. It matters. And never underestimate the power of your group. And it actually reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Margaret Mead that I'll close with tonight. It's never, ever underestimate the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. Thank you. I don't know. Did you want to do questions? Did you say that? We don't have time. Okay, we're good.
I'm just gonna
I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys out there.
Is this on? Yeah. Thank you so much, Mac. That was absolutely incredible. My name is Corey Flam-Meltzer, and I am one of the board members of the Community Foundation. And I was listening to your fantastic presentation and watching those incredible pictures, and you made a reference a couple times to old Florida, about old Florida. Well, you know what? You're new Florida, and you're our legacy, and this is the legacy that we all have to share, and I thank you so very much for what you're doing. Just another round of applause. People talk about, the talent in Florida and talent leaving Florida. Well, we are so glad to have your talent here and showing the world what Florida has to offer, so thank you. I just want to wrap it up. Mac gave us a magnificent reminder of how lucky we are to live in such a fantastic place. And we know that the Eco Broward message is going to continue with all of your help and our help at the foundation. And we hope you carry this message forward into the community, because this is one of our new initiatives that we're very excited to spotlight. By now, you should have noticed on your at your table a notepad. And in keeping with our environmental theme, it is made actually from recycled apple peel. I can't right now because I'm a little congested, but if you sniff it, you can actually smell the apple in it. And we wanted to give you this book because the Legacy Society members, all of you, are thoughtful philanthropists. And we hope you use the journal to write down ideas that Mac inspired in you today. I know he gave me a lot to think about as well. I don't know if I'm going to go out in that hammock, but maybe I'll take a camping trip one night. But I want you to use Mac's advice. I want you to take the journal and record ideas, record your adventure into nature, and use it as a reminder of all the issues that matter to you and us as a state. And let us know when your inspiration strikes, because we at the foundation are really excited to listen to you and your thoughts and find out how we can continue to connect all of you, who are the people that care, with the causes that matter, for good and forever. So our thanks again to our Legacy Society members, and thank you all for coming today, and enjoy the rest of the day. And it sounds like Mac will be around if you want to talk to him personally and find out more about his book. I'm going to give a plug for the book. When does it come out? Came out in October, on sale. You can get it at bookstores everywhere and at Amazon.com and everywhere, yes. He should have had some here too. But thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.